This is Noma Dimitri from the Alpine Garden, and today we're going to talk about why are flowers so beautiful and also why do they smell so good. Spring is finally here, even up here in the Alps. There's still snow up in the mountains, but down here in the valley at 3,000 feet, spring is finally coming, and some of the early birds, like this forsythia behind me, are in full bloom. I will show you some more examples of what that means. Right here we have the exquisite pink of an almond tree, and here they're little almond flowers, and look how pretty and gentle and fragile they are. Each one of these things will become an almond. So come the end of the summer, around fall, I will be underneath the same tree and I will be picking almonds from this exact branch, and if all goes well, almost every one of these flowers will be an almond ready to eat. Over here we have another gentle bloomer. This is an apricot tree, and look at these sweet apricot flowers. They look actually like the almond flowers because they're in the same family of trees, believe it or not. But they have a different kind of pink. This is more of a coral pink. And as I was saying before, each one of these little flowers at some point in the end of the summer will become an apricot, and I will be back here picking apricots out of this branch, and they'll be everywhere where there's a flower, if everything goes well. Not all of these flowers will make fruits or nuts. Some of them are just pretty to look at. Here's one growing out of the rock. This particular flower is so beautiful. The roots are minuscule and they go inside the crack of the rock, and in the spring it's one of the first ones to flower. It's exuberant, and there it is, and then it's gonna become just some greenery for the rest of the late spring and summer. And to pick an entire different category, bulbs. These ones are really smelling good. These are hyacinths, and they're one of the earliest bulbs to come out, and they come in different colors, like a pink one, the white one, and this new one, this bright, bizarre coral pink. They're out, and they're also flowers, and they will also not make fruits. And look at these lovely little tulips, these little pointed tulips called Persian pearl. So they're a whole different other kind of flower that comes out in the spring as well. Very, very excited that the snows have melted and it's out. So we have different colors, different shapes, different and differences in smell. Some smell delicious, some smell badly, some don't smell at all. Why are plants making such a big effort to create these beautiful things called flowers that just last at most a couple of weeks anyways, and to give them so much beauty, fragility, and also on occasion perfume? Why do plants bother to do this? The first thing to remember is that flowers are a plant's reproductive organs. Okay, this means that the flower is the primary means by which a plant is going to have children and propagate. So as we know in nature, there are two fundamental rules: stay alive and make children. So staying alive has to do with your leaves, the photosynthesis, the roots, the water, the weather, and everything that you do to place yourself in a favorable situation as a plant so you can survive. As soon as you are ready to survive and you know that things are going well, you start making flowers, because flowers are your children. Through flowers, you'll be able to have children and colonize the valley, the mountain, whatever your ecosystem is. So how do the flowers do that? How do flowers turn into the children? We are taken, and we're very absorbed because we're humans, about the utility of flowers and the utility of the thing called seed or fruit. So we tend to think that, for example, an almond is a nut, but it's also a seed, or an apple is a fruit. But the apple as a fruit has a seed inside, which is the apple seed, which will grow. So if you take away from your head the notion that fruit is something you eat, and you see fruit as something, as a generic term. For example, a berry is also a fruit. Then you can more easily understand what goes on. So these flowers, for example, they will, in order to become children, they will have to have something that will enclose the seed. The seed is the child of the plant in embryo form. This something that will be enclosing the seed to protect it, to help it disseminate for whatever reason, is going to be the fruit. Whether you can eat it or not is not important as a human. The fact is that the thing that surrounds this seed is the fruit. Okay, this in general, this is true. So why is the fruit sometimes delicious and juicy like an apple or a kiwi, and why sometimes is a dry nothing that we're not interested in? It depends on the strategy of the plant. Some plants are into making very, very delicious fruits, like apples, tomatoes, etc., etc., that an animal will be attracted to eat. By eating it, it will also eat the seed, and then it's going to go and poop this fruit with the seed inside, and then the child will be born and propagate, and you have a new plant. Some plants have different strategies. A nut plant, for example, has a different strategy. It says, oh, I'm going to create something wonderful in a hard shell, like a walnut, let's say, so that a silly rodent like a squirrel is going to come pick me up, bury me to the ground, basically doing the work of the gardener, okay, in order to eat me in the heart of winter when he's hungry. Okay, but perhaps the little squirrel will be eaten by a fox, and therefore no one will remember where that little nut was buried, and therefore that nut will have a chance to grow and become a hazelnut tree, a walnut tree, what have you. Okay, so different plants have different strategies for doing that, for disseminating children. Now, we still haven't answered exactly. Now, we've talked about how the plant becomes the fruit and the seed, and how the seed eventually, once in the ground in the right conditions, we create the child of the plant. But we haven't discussed why are flowers beautiful and why do they smell good. And we're going to talk about that right now. So flowers are different. They have all kinds of different sexualities. They can be male, they can be female, or they can be both. In general, we can think of these three possibilities. Okay, there are other possibilities in nature. There are always other possibilities, but we'll just stick with these possibilities right now. So if you are a plant that has, if you're a flower that has both male and female parts, you're pretty much in luck, because these parts will kind of touch, and this bizarre thing called pollen will more or less move from one to the other, and then you'll be able to have reproduction and fertilization, and then you'll be able to have your fruit and your seed, and therefore your child. Okay, so this, we just walked in front of this one. Check out this one. I don't know how well you can see it. Yeah, this is another adaptation to the same story that we're talking about. This is a malus, or a crab apple, and you can see that its leaves are deep red and the flowers are red. You can see them against my jacket even better. And that's a fun thing, and again it has to do with the need of this plant to make something that looks different than anyone else, because the name of the game with plants is to have reproductive organs that look different than everybody else's. But why? Because if you're a plant, there are many, many, many plants that have only male or only female flowers. For example, let's just say this plant, this tree here, right here, let's say, for example, this is an example, right? It only makes male flowers. And this one over there, it only makes female flowers, okay? Let's just assume that this is true. It's not so true, but let's just assume. So, if that is the case, then somehow the pollen created by the male, and the male flowers create this thing called pollen, which is actually another word for sperm. Okay, here's my pond, by the way, which is just waking up. There are salamanders and a couple of fish, but not as yet a frog. So back to the, sorry, interruption. So back to the male flowers. So male flowers make something called pollen, which is seed, which is sperm effectively. Okay, and it's made in billions, and it is actually the reason why you get hay fever or pollen fever or you're allergic to pollen, because this male sperm that flows all over, and very often it's yellow, for example in pine trees, it's looking to land on something sticky. And when it lands in your nose, it actually, which is sticky, okay, which is sticky for a variety of reasons, it thinks that it's a female flower and it starts fertilizing it. The things that it exudes to fertilize your nose, okay, is what creates an allergic reaction to some of us, like myself, and then we have what's called pollen or hay fever. But I'm diverting again. So we have the male flower made by this guy, we have the female flowers made by this guy. We need to get them to meet. How are they going to meet? Well, in most cases, an insect has to be attracted to come over and go from one place to another and take the male sperm from one flower and put it to the female part, the female egg waiting to be fertilized on the female plant. So that's really the whole thing. So when you hear about pollination by bees, but not only by bees, anyone can pollinate, even mosquitoes, even horrible things like mosquitoes. When you hear of these things, that's what's really going on. Okay, so the plant needs to have this encounter happen. It needs to have this insect, the bee, go to the male flower, linger around, get on it some of the sperm, then fly over to the female flower and deposit it on the female part. That's why it needs to do this. Okay, so how does the plant get to attract this damn insect to go there? Okay, and that's where flowers come in, and that's why they're beautiful, and that's why they smell good. Because if you are in a gigantic forest, like the forest you see behind me on the mountains in the fog, okay, you see it's all very, very dark, right? But if all of a sudden you're like an almond tree, and you have this fantastic, beautiful bloom of pink flowers, you become visible in there, okay? So if a little bee is floating around and is seeing all this gray stuff and suddenly it sees like a wonderful pink thing all over the place, it's gonna go straight to that wonderful pink thing, okay? Because the bee knows that this kind of color is associated with something the bee really, really likes, which is the nectar, which is another seduction that the plant offers to. Here's a Japanese palm tree, by the way, and it's just about to flower. But anyway, I'm diverting again. Sorry. I'm excited about the garden. So the bee knows that a wonderful color or a wonderful smell is associated with food, the nectar, which is basically sugar water that the plant offers to the insects in order to seduce them even further. But in order to signal them that this is where I am, this is where the sugar water, the pollen, the nectar that you like is, the plant makes beautiful flowers with bright colors. So the bees see these things, they come down, they touch the sperm, and then hopefully they fly over to another plant, a female plant, and deposit by accident. Okay, they're not willingly doing this. It's an accidental process. They will deposit this particular pollen onto the female, and therefore you will have at that point fertilization. As soon as you have this fertilization, and look, here are some daffodils, you all know them very well, and they're here and they're very seductive, and they're waiting for an insect to come and do what I was telling you. As soon as the insect does what I was telling you, there's no reason for the flower anymore. This is why this flower is only here for that reason. As soon as the bee does its trick, the flower is done, there's no reason for it anymore, and it dies, okay? That's why you see these wilted flowers. That's the only reason. And then to replace the flower, we have the so-called fruit of the tree, or the plant, which inside will have the seed. the seed that will become the embryo, that will become the new plant, and that fulfills the whole cycle. I will say goodbye to you now with a last flower that's really beautiful, one of my favorite. Check it out. This is kind of a shy plant. You see how it looks? Because the flowers are looming downwards, but sure enough, here we go. Here are the reproductive organs of the flower. And here's this lovely bush in this lovely color. One of the early bloomers actually blooms in winter, even in snow. Noma Dimitri from the Alpine Garden.